The following is a conversation with Chris Guin of Guin Entertainment. Chris is the developer behind the 90s inspired adventure game Adventures of Chris and is working on a new 8-bit style JRPG called Geo Mythica. Before we get into the episode, I want you to check out the brand new reveal trailer for Geo Mythica. I hope you enjoy. So you shared Geo Mythica with me, and this one kind of came out of left field because I hadn't seen it yet. I didn't know it exists. And when you mentioned that, we had a trailer that recently came out, I looked into it and realized like, oh, this was just announced. Like this is brand new, and this is really cool. So with Geo Mythica, it's kind of a significant contrast or pivot from Adventures of Chris, not only in visual style, but also kind of like the game itself, being an 8-bit JRPG type of game, and having what I thought was really cool when I looked into it was the real time, like a mix of real time battle with strategy as well within the battle system, which was super cool. But what kind of kicked off that transition? So after the Adventures of Chris, where were you at in terms of your thought process and on the next game, and how did this one kind of come about?
Yeah, well, the truth is that I've always been a JRPG guy, and Adventures of Chris was in some ways a little bit of a departure for me, although I've always liked Metroidvanias, more kind of like adventure platformers. So I had that in me, and basically, like, I don't know how much you know about Adventures of Chris. There's a lot of text in that game, right? Like, in some ways, like I was RPGifying a little bit a genre that probably didn't need it, because that's just where I like to be. And so, like, while I was making Adventures of Chris, I was kind of already thinking, what would be really cool is to do an RPG next, like to finally, I had avoided it because I was thinking, oh, it's got to be such a big project for, kind of getting into the indie space. I need something that's not going to take that long. And then I do Adventures of Chris, which takes me years, so it could easily have been an RPG for the amount of time and work I spent on it. So I was thinking, this time I'm just going to do the RPG. I'm just going to do what I've always really wanted to do. But I didn't do like, it had been planned enough for a while. Like, actually, you say it's a big departure in the sense of like the setting. It's actually really not. Like, Geo Mythica is very much a geography game, and Adventures of Chris was also set on Earth, and you travel around to different places. And in fact, Geo Mythica kind of started life like it was gonna be like either a sequel or a prequel to Adventures of Chris, but just a completely different genre. I don't know if that would have worked for anybody, but I sort of thought it would be cool to connect them. It turned out that the story was much easier to get working when I severed it completely from the other game. Like, it made life so much simpler. So, like, if there's anybody who had played Adventures of Chris and they come play Geo Mythica, they'll see some like little bits, that are kind of left over from earlier concepts, like characters that overlap and some locations that overlap. And hopefully they'll think, oh, cool, like, references for the fan group, I guess. But for the most part, yeah, I just want to do an RPG. I love RPGs. And this was like my attempt at kind of Geo Mythica was in some ways a little bit of my like I have all these really cranky opinions about the state of modern RPGs, and I was going to do something a little bit different, right? A little bit against the grain. That's not necessarily the best tactic for like developing a huge audience, but satisfying to me, I guess. So yeah,
Yeah, and I like that. I like that way of thinking in terms because it's as a creator. Odds are, if you think that way, there's a pocket. There's an audience that thinks the same way. In terms of going back to, I like physical games. I like to have the tangible. I like to have that in my hand. I like to have the
yeah,
nostalgic feeling of those games. And then in terms of the design of this game, being that JRPG, you're going to have a lot of people that
oh
are
yeah.
looking for that 8-bit style. They're going to see the 8-bit style and immediately be hooked in and ready to go
Yeah,
for this
they
type of game.
they're definitely fans of the ye olden JRPGs for sure. And there's something about if I think back to like some of the earlier RPGs, we're getting back to the NES era, but also through the Super Nintendo era, there are certain like qualities of those games that even though like I feel like there's a lot of indie love for them, like including a lot of my buddies, my indie dev buddies, um, uh, it turns out that some of that stuff is pretty hard to capture. I think in a modern context. So
Yeah.
I'm making an attempt, and we'll see how it goes. But
Well, again, I think that from what I saw with the gameplay, that's what took it over the top for me.
oh,
Because
cool.
when you have the visual style of that 8-bit visual style and the sound is there too, like the sound effects, it's all there. You get that. But like you said, there are a lot of indies that take cracks at it, and they can align with the music, they can align with the visuals, but adding the modern elements that don't clash too much to make it stand on its own as a unique product.
Yeah, it's an interesting balance, right? Because there are certain aspects of those old games that we definitely want to stay as far away from as possible. Well, actually, that's not
Yep.
always true. There are cases where you might even want some of those like lack of quality of life things. I don't know, like what your familiarity is with the really early Dragon Warriors and early Final Fantasies and so forth, but like you know inability to save anywhere, um you
That's
know
a common one for sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
item menus that you can't sort, item menus that don't have any tooltips, right? Like just a lot of like
Yep.
stuff where you're like, I don't need to go back to that. Like there's no nostalgia for some of these things, like, or you have to buy every heal potion in Final Fantasy one by one,
Yep.
right? Like we can get away from a lot of that stuff. Like that's not the nostalgia bit. Or sprite flicker. I'm sure there are people that really miss sprite flicker, but I think it's okay to
Digital Foundry.
it does happen, yeah. But for most people, it probably don't miss it too much. But all that said, like I think there are aspects to the earlier games that are surprisingly hard to achieve in a modern context, just because of, in some sense, it's like design principles, right? Like in the early games, you couldn't have you had to tell your story in a very concentrated way, right, or in a very theatrical way, very abstracted way. You can't rely on just reams and reams of dialogue. But of course, now dialogue is really super cheap, so you can dump that in there,
Yep.
and there are fans of that. But I think there is an appeal to a little more like straightforward storytelling, a little more like get in the scene, get out. You still have the story, but you're not necessarily like giving people a mini series necessarily. Um,
Yeah.
but like I said, it's all a question of taste. Hopefully there's an audience for a little more fast paced, a little more lighthearted kind of storytelling. We were talking about Mario RPG earlier. There's definitely a
Mhm.
narrative in there, but I would argue that like the narrative is more like kind of a skeleton for a very colorful, lighthearted adventure. That's a little bit more the spirit of Geo Mythica, I think, um, than maybe something like Xenogears, right? Where you're where
Yeah.
you're where you're getting real heavy. and
Yep.
yeah, real text based. You know.
Yeah. And it's I think an easy, maybe an easy way in theory to avoid. So say I was if I was to create a game, if I woke up magically and had the ability to write code in any fashion, um, but if I were, one of the things that I would do, I think, would be to go back to the games that I had nostalgia for, that I did, that inspired me, play through them again, and where are the easy points of friction that break that nostalgia that I had
Yeah.
for it. Yeah, the saves would be one of the, just jot them down as I play through it. Like, oh, that did suck. I remember that sucked.
Mm-hmm.
And then, because the nostalgia, if you're just thinking back on it without the game, you're gonna get a lot of the highlights. But as you play through it again, you get those deeper memories that'll start to pop back up, and then the feeling, that muscle memory of with the controller going through it, those will creep back in too. And then it makes it easier to identify the things you genuinely did not like. It's easy to have pure positive nostalgia the longer you get away from something, the more that time goes on. So that if you can try to bring it back as close as possible, then
Yeah.
it's easier to find those moments of like, oh, this, I hated this level, I hated, this for this. um, that would kind of be a starting point for me to identify what are some things that I need to improve on with
Right.
this game. Because because then you're kind of going back in time for the players, instead of having them do it for you. You're doing it for them.
Yeah. Give them a fresh something that is in the vein of something old. It's nostalgia. Like.
Yeah, yeah,
But
absolutely. But the gameplay, that real time, because it
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 is
started to
different.
make me think
It
of,
is different. It is not nostalgic to a large
very
extent.
much.
And this is actually it's both the thing I'm kind of most proud of about Geo Mythica, but it's also kind of the biggest risk, because a lot of people who see an NES type game, they're like turn based. I'm all about that.
Yep,
I like turn
yep.
based too, but I also like action RPGs. And I had this idea for a system that I thought was going to be really fun, but it may not be exactly what you're expecting. Where it plays a little bit more, maybe like the Seiken Densetsu series, where you have your it's more action based, but you can always freeze time to use abilities, use your party member skills, and you might not be expecting that necessarily, but there are games that do that, and I think those games are liked, right? So like there's a solid chance that there's an overlap there.
You know what game came to mind immediately, which is kind of out of left field a little bit, when I watched the trailer, the initial trailer. Uh, it was Final Fantasy 12.
Okay.
That was one where I initially, right out of the gate, that was my first thought. That, and then a little bit of Zelda obviously was in there, but Final Fantasy 12 was the one that popped up into my head when I watched the combat start. I was like, oh, they're like, this is real time, but then there's also like he can stop, and there's strategy involved here too. And then yeah, immediately it was Final Fantasy 12 for me.
12.
And
Oh, go ahead.
oh no, I was just gonna say that aspect of the game is what put it over the top for me. That's what I like the most about the game.
Oh, cool.
And that's what does, like you talked about earlier, there are many indies specifically that attack the nostalgic retro theme, that vibe. They try to create from that, which is great. It shows the inspirations, and the origins of a lot of creators, and a lot of them like to go back to that origin and create their own spin on it. But like you said, a lot of them will do a JRPG. Okay, turn based. That's a given. It's a given. This one, adding that twist in the gameplay element, that I think is going to do what you're looking for. It is for me already, and I haven't even played it, but it's done that. Oh, this product is unique and stands on its own. It can stand on its own legs, and it's not just trying to be a ripoff of
Well,
X game from NES.
this may be a little bit of a strange thought, but in a paradoxical way, I kind of want the way that the combat works in Geo Mythica, which is, you know, not the way it would have worked in a real 8-bit RPG, but maybe a later one. But I, even though it's different, I still kind of want it to get at something like kind of the way that combat worked in those early games, where mostly it was pretty fast paced and fairly like if I think about like the way that you would grind in Dragon Quest, Final Fantasy type games, like in the early days, you were getting through fights at a relatively fast clip, right? And that's something that a lot of modern indie RPGs have kind of gotten away from because they want the fights to be significantly more interesting, right? Which I totally understand, but it does mean that like each fight becomes a little bit more of a slog, and the like the grinding aspect now feels really much like grinding, right? Because you're like you're having to really play. It's like if every single battle is like Final Fantasy Tactics level intense, like some more recent indie RPGs, that can get pretty, you know, that can wear on you a little bit. You need something that feels more
Yeah.
like I'm gonna mow these guys down as I go through, and the challenge comes from the attrition component, right? Like I'm maybe I'm losing some HP, I'm losing some MP over time, and I got to make sure I've got the stuff for that, but not necessarily from every single individual fight, save like a mini boss or a boss. And so I'm hoping that, like, you know, in a little bit of an ironic way, the fast paced action combat actually does capture a little bit of that spirit of some of the earlier games too, right? You're quick. It's not every fight is the end of the world. The attrition component is back, which some indie games do that too. I don't want to be unfair to you know, Sea of Stars and so forth that
Yeah.
that have that bit in it, but yeah. So I'm glad you you latched on to that. Oh, Final Fantasy 12. That's actually not a game that I have a whole lot of experience in. I played it some, but I think maybe what you're picking up on there is that Final Fantasy 12, from what I understand, was heavily based on MMO mechanics,
Hmm.
and Geo Mythica is also, right. I'm a big vanilla World of Warcraft fan, and that made its way into the game a lot. And that, I don't know if you can see that in the trailer necessarily, but you have threat mechanics, you have interrupts, you have you know, AE moves, you have you know, different resources that each character handles differently, right? Depending on whether or not, you know, you're the main fighter tank character. Like there's some overlap there, and I know that, like, you know, kind of the way that your party members will auto attack by default while your main character does his thing is probably also a little bit of that FF12. There's no gambit system, I should say, in Geo Mythica.
Yeah.
There's no like intensive AI. In fact, that's the very deliberate design decision on my part, is I want you to feel like you're controlling the whole party as much as possible. So, you know, except for the auto attack, everything that your party members do is going to be a command, either via the menu that freezes time or via a hotkey. Um, so hopefully it gets, you know, you're controlling the party in real time and it feels reasonably fast paced and intense. And yet you can slow it down if you need to. You know, you can take your time
Yeah.
if you need to.
And I think it kind of scales with the player. And what I mean by that is, when I think of those that would get the nostalgia kick, uh, being millennials and you know, older and so on, where they're at in their lives now, they're not, no matter how much you want to replicate it, they're not going to have um, that environment where there are zero responsibilities and they can sit in front of a TV and play all through the night, you know, freely. That's gone, you know, no matter what, for better or for worse.
Yep.
So to cater to that experience, when that experience isn't there for that particular audience, you're inherently creating friction. And so creating a gameplay element like the faster paced, um, you know, kind of real time battle system, while giving flexibility and freedom to slow it down as you like, caters better to that audience who it's supposed to be catering to begin with, I think.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, you're going to have another audience that doesn't get the nostalgic kick because NES is well before their time. They were born 16 years ago.
Yeah.
And so that audience, they have a massively lower attention span. They never, even if they have the ability to have I don't have a care in the world, I don't have a job, I don't have any responsibilities, I can play all night if I want to. They have different attention spans that's been formed through social media,
Yeah, they may not be able to
content, and
slog 7 hours through a game,
100%. It's a different world, or it's a different environment for them growing up. So this caters to that as well. So you're hitting multiple player types in the game design. And I think that's where going the nostalgic route, but changing things, this is a prime example of the changing for the better, because not only are you improving the feeling of the game, but you're improving the experience for the right people, just naturally, while also you're freshening a game that's hitting the nostalgia kick, but also catering to the aging audience, and
Yeah.
the younger audiences at the same time.
Yeah, no, I
It's
hope it hits that
interesting.
balance. That would be fantastic. It actually frustrated me a lot when people, publishers or whoever, when I was talking about Adventures of Chris, to be like, who's your intended audience for this? I'm like, why are you limiting me like that? Because it's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
oh, it's got to be just kids or it's got to be just adults. There are games that have a pretty wide appeal that work for a lot of different groups of people.
Only people named Chris.
Yeah,
That's what this
exactly.
game's
Well,
for.
well, if you saw that, everybody named Chris came by my booth at MagFest and took a selfie at the banner. There's a lot of Chris's out there, and they all tend to be born in the same like I don't know. It's an
Yeah.
interesting thing. We're all millennials, I guess. But yeah, no, the younger generation, the people that refer to the Wii as retro, and it makes me feel really really old. Like they,
Yeah.
I'm not trying to keep them out either. There's
Yeah.
there and my my little 11-year-old nephew has played Geo Mythica and thought it was a blast, right? Like I think of course my 6-year-old nephew recently got introduced to Zelda 1 and he was having a real good time with that too. So don't discount like NES hard and ancient pixel art. It can go multiple generations. Uh, there's some
It's good.
classic status.
That's good.
Yeah,
Yeah. You never want that to kind of fall out
yeah.
for anyone. The classics.
No, no.
Um, yeah. I did want to talk to you about, and I'm bringing it up because I don't want to forget.
Okay.
Musicals. Tell me about what you're doing in musicals and your experiences, because I've looked at your about, and it seems like it's something that is a passion of yours. And I'd like to know more about that. It seems to me, from what I saw, that you've written two or produced two. Where I know I'm wrong on part of that.
Well, so before I was doing game development as much as I am now, I thought, I kind of want to be Mr. Musical Theater Writer, which I guess might potentially not seem like there's a lot of overlap. I think there's a pretty significant amount of overlap, but I had a lot of fun, writing songs, coming up with plots. And when I lived in Boston, there was a pretty good theater community. Obviously not New York level, but they had it was a lot of opportunities. There were other people trying to write musical theater, so I could like join their groups and stuff, and we could critique each other's stuff back and forth. And it was a great experience. I had one show that I wrote that I did it's called a staged reading, where like you just get the actors and they're all dressed in black and they kind of read and sing along, but there's no set, no it's just a much cheaper way of getting that done, and that's mostly just to like test something out and maybe build a little publicity for it. And then but I did have one show produced by a fringe theater company when I was in Boston, and that was just an amazing experience. I was honestly like, I think I I don't tend to have very like high hopes for any of my creative works. Like I sort of assume that, the marketplace is so crowded, the marketplace is so full, competition is so steep that
Mm.
just even the fact that this small fringe theater company thought my show was compelling enough to want to do to actually bring to life, it's just a crazy thing. Like, and it's not even like, it's not like, went to Broadway or anything, nothing even close to that. But like, it was still like, oh man, something I wrote is actually like being performed by people. They hired musicians, to come in, like four guys and a music director. And I'm like, man. And like, people are coming up and asking me like, so what, so this line here, what did you mean by this? As though like, this is like, I don't know, like in the theater world, there's so much respect for the text, right? Because they're maybe used to like Shakespeare, they're used to these other kinds of, you might reinterpret things a little bit, but you don't like violate the text, right? You say what's written, and people have like so much respect for the writer, and I'm like, I don't know why. Because if you just, it just felt kind of strange, because I'm like, I wrote this, this is, and you're, well, this is the first time it's been produced, so if you have feedback or something, we can fix it. Like I'm more the iterative guy, like we'll do agile musical theater writing. But it was a real good experience. It was the main issue though is I left Boston, come back to my hometown in Alabama shortly after it got produced, and there are theater companies here and in Birmingham, but I just never really got back on that horse. And part of it was because I was playing around with games and having fun with that.
Hmm.
But also like there's something kind of discouraging about, you get that show produced and you think, oh my gosh, I didn't think this would ever happen, even at a small scale, right? But it did, and it feels amazing. And then it's over. And when the theater is over, it's really over, right? Like they strike the set, everything is gone. You might have a recording, a grainy,
Hmm.
terrible, webcam level recording from the back of the theater. And you have the
Yeah.
CD that you had recorded, but like that's just gone, right? Like that is very in the moment, and then it's just over. And there's such a coming down from that high, and then also there's the realization, I got to do this all over again. Like all the work that it took. Like you think, oh, you got your foot in the door, you had a show produced. Well, that takes me from like competing with 800 million to like 500 million people, right? Like it's a step in the
Hmm.
right direction, but it is no guarantee of anything. And nobody wants to be the second one to do your show, right? Everyone wants to be like the first one. So you got to write another one, and you got to find the right group for it, and you got to hustle. And it's just like I feel like I was back at square one. So I think that's part of the reason that I was like, I'm gonna try something else, and I had
Yeah.
had games, had the ideas for things, um, and there's still storytelling through music, right? Like there's some significant like um, in RPGs. I don't think there's any genre quite as theatrical, right? Especially if you look back at like Final
Yeah.
Fantasy IV, Final Fantasy VI, Chrono Trigger. The emotions are big. The you got the big poses, you got the sprite acting. That's there's a lot of like suspension of disbelief. Your characters are kind of moving to the side, or they're speaking directly to the player. Sometimes in Final Fantasy VI, that could
Hmm.
happen. Like, and in Final Fantasy VI, you got literal opera, right? Like, if you want to take it like a step further, um, so I don't know. I'm just saying, like it's not quite such a huge transition from one to the other. Maybe someday I'll go back and write another show. I've got ideas, but I have to work myself up to that. It's a lot of work.
Was watching your show happen, was that more fulfilling than the launch, like getting your game out in the wild for Adventures of Chris?
It's different. It's definitely different. I would say they're both pretty awesome experiences. Um, it's different with the play because you're seeing a lot of stuff happen in real time right there. When the game is
Yep.
launched, like you're just kind of like life is still weirdly the same and you know what's out
Mm-hmm.
there. Like I had a publisher for Adventures of Chris, which was fantastic because they took care of a lot of the like day to day getting the logistics done. So once I had developed the game, I was I was basically done, right? So the launch happened and um I was just like, okay, what are the reviews going to be? I'd watch Twitch streamers, right? And that's a little nerve wracking too. But if they're having a good time, that's a great experience. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Reviews coming in is a little nerve wracking. Seeing okay, how are people going to respond to this? Um, so yeah, it is a little different. The thing with Adventures of Chris though is it was not that big of a trough after after the release, the way that my musical was, right? Because like the game still kept going. There was still like it wasn't like we got 2 weekends and then we're done with the game. It could still grow. It could still find more people in the audience. At
Mm-hmm.
one point, a YouTuber with a sizable audience found it, and I got a kind of a secondary spike from that. That was really cool. We got kind of like, oh, hey, it's still got some life in it. And you'll still see Twitch streamers play it. Like it survives longer, so there's not as much of a oh, it's over, oh, that's sad, oh, the stage is empty.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's just it lasts longer. Um,
I wonder if there's a place for trying to extend um, the lifespan of these plays. Like, I wonder if there's a solution to that
well,
nowadays.
financial success is currently the solution to it. Some
Sure,
like Phantom
sure.
of the Opera was on in the
Yeah.
80s and only very recently closed, on Broadway. That's huge.
Yeah.
For anything to last that long, it's just astonishing.
But I mean, like, so when you were saying with Adventures of Chris, you had a YouTuber, like a sizable one, pop up, and then that immediately brings it back into, you know, into the forefront. Just trying to think of if there's a way to encapsulate the play, every play, and distribute that, whether it be live, through streaming, broadcasting somehow in a high quality way,
They're
to be able to reach a wider audience,
yeah, straight.
if that's not already a thing.
It isn't. It isn't. I don't know how theaters employ modern stuff like streaming because I've been really out of that world since about 2014, 2015.
Mm.
So like, there's a lot like how does this play together? I know during the pandemic, Zoom theater became a thing because it had to be. But
Yeah.
as to whether or not like there's some special technological solution, one of the things like if your play is done in New York in a Broadway sized theater, like there's I think I want to say it's the New York Public Library, but I'm not sure. Will actually like they have they will record it high quality footage and they store it forever in like in on premises, in the library, and you can go and watch plays from decades ago. um
That's really cool.
I'm not sure if you have to have some kind of permission to do that, but I remember like theater students would do this all the time, and I'm like, man, I would do that just for fun. I just go and
Sure.
like see what all those old shows were like. um and now it's it's a little sad. Like I someone was saying like, oh, we're going to New York, and would you have any recommendations for what shows to see? I'm like, I don't even know what's playing right now. Like I
Yeah.
haven't been paying attention, but yeah, I don't know.
It's
You
very
have
interesting.
any love of theater yourself? Like, is that something you ever had any interest in?
I've been to, my girlfriend does, and her and her mother,
Oh, cool.
they'll go to shows. They'll travel and go to shows. Um, in Wilmington, we've got a really nice theater,
Oh, cool.
and so I've gone to a few. And there is something that I can see. It's kind of similar to stand-up comedy in a way, and what I mean is being present in person. You can't really replicate that experience. That's a It's a unique experience being in the crowd.
Amen to that.
Um, so that may be why the Zoom theater and the broadcasting may not be something that I've seen, being something very popular. Because again, like it's not. If you were to watch a stand-up comedian live on YouTube, it's a totally different vibe
Oh
than
yeah.
sitting there in front of them
Well,
in a crowd of
when I
people.
went to see the producers um, in New York, like I just thought it was like side-splittingly hilarious. I had, and I realized kind of coming out of that a lot of that was the energy of the crowd. Because if you're like
Yeah,
retelling the
there's a lot of energy.
if you're retelling the jokes later, you're like, oh, that's all right, but I don't know why I thought that was like the most amazing joke ever. Well, you did because everybody around you is having such a good time. There's an infectious
Yep.
quality to it. Um, it's still a good show. Don't get
And
me wrong, but
being in a theater, those acoustics too, the
mm-hmm.
acoustics, and I don't know, there is an energy after each, uh, when everyone starts clapping, and
that
it's
that
just like there's this energy and vibe that is, yeah, you can't really
that
because you couldn't even do like VR if you want to do
oh
like a
no,
VR
no,
experience for
no.
that. You're still not gonna get it. You're still not gonna get that
Well,
experience. It'd be better, but it wouldn't be the same.
there's another kind of geriatric millennial thing that I've got, which is I am a fan of old fashioned multi camera sitcoms. And I think a lot of that is that they kind of recreate some of that theatrical experience with the fact that you've got the live audience and you can hear them laughing, you can hear their
Do you mean like Seinfeld?
Seinfeld, right? Seinfeld, Friends,
Yeah,
Frasier,
yeah.
going back to I Love Lucy, right? Like who invented the
Hmm.
genre? Like you have this classic theatrical television that when a lot of people in modern like younger generations, a lot of people in my generation, honestly, like they hear the audience laughing and they call it a laugh track, right? Because they
Hmm.
think it's fake and they resent it, right?
Sure.
They feel like, oh, I just wish they would get rid of it, and like that drives me crazy because I'm like, you get a whole different experience when you get that, at least that little simulation of feeling like you're in the audience versus like you can have comedies that are like sort of wry, ironic, you know but then if you really want like old fashioned joke, laugh, like big laugh kind of comedy, it really helps to be in a theatrical kind of setting and experience. So not a lot of people seem to agree with me on that, but you know, that's where it stands.
Well, so my girlfriend and I are actually rewatching Friends. We pick a show like when we take our lunch break. We both work from home, and so when we take a lunch break, we'll
Oh,
put
cool.
an episode of something on, and then we'll watch it from beginning to end. It's we'll do like The Office, Seinfeld. Seinfeld was the last one, and now it's Friends. We've seen them before, but
Yeah.
we'll just kind of run it. Um, and I will say there are some points during Friends where the crowd helps me better understand the emotion trying to be conveyed in the particular scene.
Okay.
I know it sounds redundant, but uh, it should be obvious when it's something is supposed to be humor and funny and I'm laughing. But if I'm not necessarily paying a ton of attention, but I did register like what was said, I'm not always, if you removed the crowd, if you remove them altogether, it may go over my head. And it's something that helps, especially for over time, because as certain jokes and certain references over time, I still get them because I watched it growing up too.
Yeah.
But
Good old
there are certain
90s.
things that may not scale. Yeah, I can't emphasize enough how much I loved the creative from the 90s specifically, and it's attached to me because I was born in the 1991. But I loved MTV at the time, early MTV in the 90s. They approved certain animations that were just uber
Hmm.
strange, and I grew up watching those. Aeon Flux, I think, was a part of that too. Beavis and Butthead was in there, but they did this animation something segment that they would do, and it was a bunch of shorts back to back to back, and certain shows started from that, and their shorts would be in it, and they
Oh
just
yeah.
became their own shows. But there was that weird, strange early 90s creative
Aesthetic.
vibe.
Yeah.
It says it's a unique aesthetic, and it's something that like a lot of 90s t-shirts have in them. Graphic tees, they'll have it in them. But that at that time there were a lot of programs back then where they're trying to figure out, it's like they were trying to establish what is the millennium, like what is 2000 going to look like, but you're like a decade
Yeah,
early.
exactly.
You're
Yeah.
trying to figure it out.
Like
So
retro
you're going from
futurism.
80s to trying to like, what's 2000 going to look like in 10 years? Let's do that now. And you got these weird styles, and I was all about it.
Yeah. Oh, even the
Loved
80s had some
early
just
90s.
strange aesthetic choices that could come up. Like it's funny to me, as I was born in the 80s, and a lot of the entertainment that was intended for kids, you look back at it now and you're like, that is nightmare fuel. You know,
Yes.
like
Yeah.
how did you get away with showing kids some of this stuff? Like some of those scenes from like Never Ending Story, that's scary stuff. Um,
Yeah.
but like, and you had Tim Burton doing stuff that was for kids, and
Yep.
yeah, it's just like it's sort of a different world, where now it seems like my nieces and nephews, the kids that I know, everything is so padded and safe in some ways.
Yep.
And like, even dad was showing me Star Wars when I was a kid, which is, you think, oh, that's pretty tame. Well, it is now. At the time, you had like, you're seeing corpses and bloody arms getting chopped off and stuff like that, and you're 5 and you're like, what?
Yeah. 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 And the thing is, the lack of CGI back then made it scarier.
Yes.
CGI now makes it easier to just take in, like a horror film, and oh yeah, his arm got cut off. All right, cool,
Yeah, you're
sick.
just watching. It's like you're watching a
But
cartoon in some ways. There's a little bit of a
yeah,
distance there that you sort of know subconsciously. Yeah.
80s, it's like, what? Oh my god!
Somebody
Like, what is that?
sculpted that thing, right? Like, that is a real thing
Yeah,
that existed in physical space. That Velociraptor in
yeah,
Jurassic Park. Well, actually, some of them were CGI, but some of those were real things that they built, or puppets or whatever. And like, man, it's
yeah.
scary stuff.
They went crazy back
Or
then. But it was
Gremlins. Oh my gosh.
Gremlins was nightmare fuel for me.
Absolutely.
Growing up.
100%. Yeah, no way.
I mean it. And again, that's early. Like that's not your high quality CGI stuff. That's just that what I think it is, or what I think a part of it is when you have new technology or a new creative platform, the early creations are so much more substantial because they're breaking ground. And so they're it's like, if I had to look at it as an RPG, their creative bar is a like 9 to 10 out of 10 to maximize this new technology or new thing. But then over time, as more knowledge happens, and then you have these, in terms of creativity, the bar is at like a 2 out of 10, but the polish will be like 10 out of 10.
Oh
The
yeah.
the efficiency 9, 10 out of 10. But again, it takes the real true groundbreaking creatives to come in and just like pave the way, and those early creations are the ones going back to early Final Fantasies
Mm-hmm.
back in the day, where yes, they were using pixel art, because that was this new form of showing off the games, which that was like That was the worst description of what I'm trying to convey. I can't think of a lower quality way to express. But what I'm trying to say is like the big blocks. No. Early on with Final Fantasy, you had pixel art, as that was the limitations, I would assume, of the times. And so they found ways with those restrictions and limitations to still convey what they wanted to
Yeah.
convey creatively, using looking at the character, like looking at the player,
Yeah, and those
having
limitations
the
made them more creative. That's all. That's like, I don't know if you know Pat Holloman, um, who's written a bunch of books on game design. He works with something classic, but like that's his big thing, right? Restriction makes you more creative. Restriction, you know, results in sometimes the better product, right?
it makes a ton of
Because
sense.
you have to work within these frameworks to kind of get what you want across. I was just thinking, like you're mentioning these early Final Fantasy games and so forth, like that weird in between, not even in between, but like stuff that's kid friendly and stuff that's weirdly like either scary or kind of adult, all, you know, dealing with heavier subjects, all kind of blended together, is something that I feel like is harder to get across now to some extent. I remember when I was looking for artists for Adventures of Chris early on, and it'd be like, okay, so what are you looking for? Are you looking for cute or cool? And I was like,
Mm.
if this were the 90s, you wouldn't have to ask. You would just do both.
Yeah.
Like you think of like
Yeah.
like Cloud in Final Fantasy VII, right? The little blocky
Yep.
sprite. Like he's kind of cute. He's also really cool, right? Because there's this weird
Yeah.
intermixing of like the abstract representation and like what it represents. He's got that
Yep.
giant sword, which is kind of absurd. At the same time, it's kind of awesome. Like
Same thing with
yeah,
Sephiroth.
yeah,
Just
yeah. You
like, how long does a sword need to be, man? Like,
I don't know if you've seen these
what is
memes
going
of
on?
like him on his giant Segway from this most recent trailer, but it's
I
pretty
did. I
funny.
haven't seen the trailer. I just saw the segue and I was like, that can't be. And that it was a screen from the trailer. I still haven't watched it, but
Yeah, no, I
yeah,
need to
that
also.
was
It's on the agenda. Um,
yeah,
but yeah, no, like that space, like even now, it's like people are like, well, I want everything to be either super dark, super serious, super grown up, or it's got to be like totally kid friendly and totally safe in pablum. And there is no like, well, can't we have it be a little bit of both? Can't we intermingle everything somewhat? Harder to
yeah,
achieve.
yeah. So maybe it was limitations, like restrictions, that led to that spiked
Mhm.
creativity and then resulting designs, and maybe also like hard
But
drugs. So maybe it was a combination of the two. The 80s, 70s, 80s,
yeah,
they
well, it
had their
certainly was
different.
a thing at Atari, from what I understand. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. Maybe there's a mixture that needs to happen with these designers. I don't know,
yeah, just
but
maybe a little bit less like a little fewer stakeholders sitting around a boardroom table. Everybody's got to make decisions and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
100%. Yeah, that's a big thing, and that's something that in my space doing marketing, like marketing should never be taken into consideration in terms of product development ever. And I think at a lot of companies, marketing and sales and these places that have no business in the creative
Hmm.
process end up having a lot of stake in that process, where again they should have zero.
Yeah, no, that's funny
It
that you
should be
bring
out.
that up though. Like a lot of people, when they find out that I had a publisher for Adventures of Chris, they're like, "Oh no, did they like interfere? Did they like tell you this and that?" Like, not even a little bit, right? Like they,
And that's how it should
yeah.
be.
Well, the funny thing is, I actually kind of wanted them to a little bit, because I'm like, can I make some changes that would make it more likely to be successful? Like, do you have any advice for me? Like, obviously, don't tell me like, you need to go back and do a page one rewrite, or like
Sure.
replace your main character with a cute rabbit with helicopter ears. Like that'll really sell to the 7-year-olds or whatever. Like there's limits, but like, hey, maybe there's some things I could do. I wasn't entirely like, unopen to suggestions from someone that I thought might have expertise, but they were like, yep, nope, nope. we
Sure.
we we, we trust in your product. I'm like, okay, you trust it more than I do, actually. But yeah.
Yeah, there is a balance of hands on, hands off. Obviously, you don't want to push creative decisions, but if they come to you and they want feedback, give that feedback.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, because they're going to get feedback, or they should get feedback from, you know, playtesters from multiple
Yeah,
sources,
it's so
but they should
hard.
never come in and demand. They should
Oh
never
no,
come in
no,
and be like,
no.
no, this is what it needs to be, or you should change this. We played this level. We did not like this level.
Yeah,
Change it.
cut it
It's a water
immediately.
level.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, maybe I should, be more thankful for blessings on that front, but yeah.
No, it's good. There are a lot of publishers nowadays that have figured that out. That have, you know, stay out of the way. Also, in terms of IP ownership, that's not your IP.
Yep.
Creative freedom and rights, that's the creators naturally. I think that in no world should that be on you. Give them the freedom, but be there for direction, helping them steer the ship, helping them get to the
That
finish
said,
line.
if you want to buy those rights from me, I can be bought.
Open.
Like
Yeah. As we all.
Yeah.
I spoke with Jason Newman of a game called Isles of Sea and Sky. It used to be Akura, but then he changed the name of it.
Isles of Sea and Sky.
And
okay.
very cool. If you look it up, it's retro aesthetic, more Game Boy Advance. Think like Link's Awakening.
Oh wow, yeah, absolutely.
Style. Yep. And so the cool thing about Isles of Sea and Sky is the design is purposely avoiding text. And reasoning for that, partial reasoning for that, is so that as many people around the globe can play it and still get communication signals through the design, the raw design itself. It's an open world puzzler where you can freely navigate puzzles as you want. So you don't have to do certain puzzles, and you don't have to do puzzles in the same order, and you can travel the map and kind of explore too. But at the end of the day, the design is what's communicating to you, not the words. And it's telling a story mostly through that. And one of the benefits of that is localization, not having to spend, you know, a lot of money on localization. So you can open up that net for players. But I also just thought that thought process in terms of design was very interesting when it was being explained to me. And I played the demo and it did make sense, going that route for that particular game.
Yeah, for sure.
Being the open world puzzler.
Yeah. Localizing, not always terribly cheap. Thankfully, publisher paid for that for Adventures of Chris.
Yeah, that's always a benefit.
So he did get 5 other languages besides English in there, I think, ultimately, which I was like, oh
that's
man,
awesome.
I had, it's a little bit like, seeing your musical produced, right? Like you're like, I didn't know anyone was going to spend money on something that I made. It's a little crazy. Oh, and they did a little animated trailer too, which is awesome.
Yeah,
but yeah, no, I totally sympathize with like wanting to reduce your text as much as possible. It makes a lot of economic sense. It does, not every game, is necessarily going to be able to do that, but
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, no, if you can, it's worth it to pull that in a little bit.
Yeah, I just bring it up because it was something that when I heard about it, I couldn't think off the top of my head of another game that I had played recently that had that in mind in terms of design and how they wanted to communicate just through the game itself, like the mechanics and just raw gameplay, communicating through that.
I feel like there are kind of indie games that really try hard to get that experiential aspect to it, like the player as protagonist, and environmental storytelling or whatever, and those tend to not be JRPGs.
It's got to be. I mean, it's got to be insanely difficult to go that route because of interpretation.
Yeah, and you also it tends to that kind of storytelling lends itself to a very certain sort of emotional state. like, oh, this is mysterious, oh, this is kind of surreal and weird, or maybe it's
Yep.
depressing, right? Like
Hmm.
that lends itself like to more. Yeah, there's certain things that you can do with that sort of experiential storytelling more easily. And sometimes you just need somebody to talk, to do certain kinds of storytelling. And
Yeah.
it just depends on what you're trying to do. um
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. 100%.
Mist from back in the day can be very mysterious without saying much of anything for most of the time.
That's one of the games I've seen so much of. Back in the day, I would see a lot of Mist. I could even
You
remember,
might
I
have
could
been like 2 or
vaguely remember.
3 or something like that when
Yeah.
when Mist was big.
Oh, I was gaming right out. My dad had me playing like, we had the NES, the Sega Genesis, some older consoles too,
Really?
right out of the gate.
Okay.
Right out of the gate.
Nice. So you're like,
Because he got them from his buddies. He would, when the new generation would come out, he would just buy his buddies backlogs, and they would just have.
oh,
I remember
you're like a
one day I just came home
ColecoVision
from
or
school.
something, and
Yep. And yeah, and so my dad, I vividly remember this one day I came home from school. Oh man, it might have been pre. I have some like vivid, like really old memories. They're very random, but there's one in particular where my dad came home and he just had this giant box, and in that box was the NES, and then just rows and rows and rows of games, and the gun, and the bazooka. It came with the bazooka. That might have been the SNES
oh
that came
yeah,
with the
yeah, yeah.
bazooka.
Super Scope 6.
Yeah, the Super Scope. We had the Super Scope. But he would bring it, and he brought in boxes of them. And so it's just classic console, massive amount
Wow.
of game. He would get it from a buddy at his work. Um,
Wow.
and so we just, played those, and right out of the gate, I was playing those. Cause the babysitter, when the sitters would come over,
Such a
we would just hang out
It's
and
such
play
a
games.
fantastic time to be alive. It's like, what is this restricting screen time concept? Like just
Yeah.
park the kid in front of a Disney sing-along
Oh,
video and go away. The
yep.
80s and 90s parenting. Way to
Yeah.
be.
It was a lot of, Echo the Dolphin, Sonic the Hedgehog, Vector Man, and
Wow.
yeah, it was a lot of that every day. Uh,
Now, did
a
you
lot of
ever actually
Sega. Now
beat
that I think about
any
it,
of the Sonic games as a kid growing up?
nope, nope.
I didn't
Frustrated. That
either.
so
I made it
frustrated.
so
The
far.
water stage.
So far, I couldn't.
There was always this water stage where the water level would rise,
Mm.
and you could only be underwater for so long.
Yeah, Sonic
And
is so
you'd get to the
stressful
area.
being underwater. Like,
So, because the music's going, it changes immediately when you're underwater, and also the movement obviously changes when you're super floaty, um, and that was the most infuriating thing ever. Vector Man 2 was insanely. Vector Man was insanely difficult. Um, I tried playing that later on in life, and I was like, oh my god, like this is way too hard. And then Echo the Dolphin was just a vibe.
oh,
but
that's a very
but I played.
good description.
Yeah, I mean, it was a good, just cool game. But I just remember the babysitter. She would come over. She's probably in like high school or something, and she would come over, and we would just play Sonic the Hedgehog back to back. We would just be playing Sonic the whole day. She'd get so mad. I'd get pissed too.
Oh no, that was
But
such a
yeah,
good little brother game though, because you had tails and someone could
yep.
hop on and just like play without interfering. It's a good time. It's a good time.
Yeah, I wish I would have played more of the NES and the SNES, or the SNES growing up, and that carried over to when the Xbox came out, the original Xbox. Um, I never played the N64. That was always
Oh,
my brother's console. I was always anti that. I was like, that's a wonky controller. I don't
that
like
is
that.
true.
Um, Yeah, and I didn't like he had Banjo Kazooie, and I just remember looking at it, I was like, I just don't like this, and
Interesting. Okay.
and then it was yeah, it was strange, but when the Xbox came out, the original Xbox, and speaking of design, at this time, the big thing was the colors black and green. It was Spawn black and green, Mountain Dew, like
Yeah, that's
ads
how
had a
you
lot
know
of
it's
like,
cool.
you know,
It's black and green.
yeah, it was that was cool when that came out, that system. And so I got the Xbox, my brother got the PlayStation 2. And so I just played nothing but like Dead or Alive, Mech Assault on the Xbox. And but as I got older, I realized how much I missed in terms of awesome N64 games,
Yeah, there's 3 of
awesome
them,
GameCube games.
that you missed.
Yeah, well, it was I didn't play Zelda. I never played any of the Zeldas
I loved
growing up.
loved Ocarina of Time and still do. I feel like I know so many people who claim, "Oh, I liked it as a kid and now it doesn't hold up." I'm like, what are you talking about? I still get have a grand time at it. I still love Mario 64. I still like Banjo Kazooie, but like I get
Yeah.
it. The N64 invented a lot of this stuff, and it wasn't entirely like
Yes.
you know a lot of the modern conveniences, a lot of the things we've done to clean it up. There's some awkwardnesses in there for sure, but like there's
Yep.
also a lot of like freshness and a lot of some things I think got lost as things got more polished. There's some roughness that I find actually really kind of appealing. Mario 64, you can break in certain ways, like you can, it's a very open, very, kind of forgiving game world that, it's like a playground, with a Mario game on it, in a way
Yeah.
that like Sunshine, Mario Galaxy were not. Those were much more streamlined games that came later. So I understand. If you didn't play the N64, and if I were to pop it up for you and like, hey, what do you think of this? You'd be like, man, that looks not good. The low
Yeah.
poly does not hold up the way that Super Nintendo 16-bit pixel art sprites hold up. Like those still look really awesome to a lot of people now.
Yep.
And 64 doesn't. PS1 even worse.
Yeah.
It's like I
But there
understand.
was a cool factor with the PS1. I did have a PS1, and there was a cool factor with some of those games. Final Fantasy VII was one.
Mm-hmm.
Legend of Dragoon, which that was just cool because of the case, the jewel case, or the Jubilee. But like all those discs, I remember when I was a kid, just having all those. When you would get a game and it was 2, 3, 4 discs deep, that would amp you up. You're like, oh
Yeah.
my god, I got all
Final
this
Fantasy VIII is
content.
never going to end. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that was always really cool.
Well,
That was peak manual season
oh
too.
right,
You
no
read the
manual. That's
manual and you
another
look
thing
through all the
that's
artwork.
gotten lost. Although I will say I have now, as someone trying to collect older games to some extent, I'm not a big fan of the optical media ones. Like that transition made it a lot harder.
Yeah,
I love my cartridges. Uh,
especially GameCube
oh,
discs.
GameCube, man. I my little PS2 thing, the laser or whatever, is not working quite right. I'm like,
Yep.
and I'm, you know,
Yeah.
and I keep finding things. I'm like, hey, Final Fantasy 9, and it's scratched or whatever. It's like, come on.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
so but I get you on the cool factor for PS1 for sure.
Their marketing was just cool too. Like they had some kind of weird, like early Sony PlayStation marketing. They kind of went for it. Like they had some strange campaigns and commercials. Like if you look up old PlayStation game, like old Twisted
Oh,
Metal, and
Twisted Metal, man.
some of these, those commercials are wonky,
They
and
were
it's
wonky for like that's just an 80s and 90s thing, right? If you look like back at like early Nintendo commercials, early Super Nintendo commercials, some of those are like that nightmare fuel thing we were talking about. Like, how was this intended
yeah,
appropriate for kids? Like, oh my gosh.
yep. Conker's Bad Fur Day had a crazy
Whoa.
one.
Well, that was just, yeah, that's not for kids anyway, but yeah.
Yeah, I know, but the commercial was equally like, man, this is mega inappropriate in a commercial. How are we being inappropriate in the commercial? But no, it
Yeah,
was just like, all right,
that's probably what they thought of as their
this is a
selling
weird
point.
game.
I didn't even
Yeah,
know Conker's Bad Fur Day existed when I had the N64. Like it was so
I didn't
late in the
either.
cycle. It's just it didn't come out. We did get Banjo Tooie. That was kind of a disappointment. When I made the joke earlier that you missed 3 really good games, that's honestly sometimes how I feel about that console. Like I loved Ocarina of Time, loved Majora's Mask. You know,
Majora's Mask is like, that's when I've played later on down the line on the 3DS was my first
it's
experience of
still
that.
good though.
Really good. That was a fun
And
one
you know,
for
Mario
sure.
64, Banjo, like this, like I had this, you know, I don't know if you remember like NES Classic, SNES Classic, they're coming out with, and everyone's thinking,
Mm-hmm.
okay, N64 Classics coming out next. We're all looking forward to it, and then nothing. But then I was like asking people, like, okay, what would you put on the N64 Classic? Like seriously, you could come up with even 10
Yeah,
games you want to put on that. It's like,
yeah,
well, okay.
that aren't available already now on other consoles that have been remastered and
I mean,
stuff. Like
like I don't know. They're big fans of GoldenEye. I appreciate that. You know,
that one does not age well at
I don't think
all.
so either. But I wasn't a big fan of it at the time actually because I'm not an FPS guy as a general rule. And then oh man, uh,
Pokemon Stadium was my that was my
yeah.
jam.
If you are a Pokemon kid, the N64 had some
Yep.
stuff for you. You know, for sure.
And it had the big box, which again, I was always sold on those things. I remember going to Blockbuster and they would have the boxes for the game, and that's what you would pick up to like look at it
Oh
and decide. But they had it was a big box because it came with an accessory to transfer. It was like a transfer pack.
yeah, it made it feel a little more
And I always thought that
substantial.
it was like, oh, this is really cool. And it's got Charizard and Blastoise on the front. I was like, oh, this is so dope.
And then
But I was a
yeah,
Pokemon
and
kid.
if you're a kart racer fan, you know, there's a couple, you know, solid games on there. I forgot about Smash Brothers. Actually, I
Oh,
love the
yep,
N64 Smash Brothers. I know it's not like, you know, if you're a real
yep,
Smash person, you don't really think highly of the N64 or whatever, but I still like it. It was a good
yeah.
time.
No, that was a good one. I did play that when I was young on my brother's N64.
Nice.
That was cool.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah, but I loved the one on GameCube uh, because of how the unlocking process
Oh yeah,
for the
so much fun.
characters,
Yeah, it's your yeah.
super
And
fun. And you would have all these legends because you didn't have the internet. Not everyone had the internet and had access to get exactly what you need to
yeah.
do. So then you had friends that'd be like, leave your console on for 99 hours straight, and then you'll get Mewtwo. And it's like, what is going on?
Oh,
And
like yeah, like
but
rumors on the
everyone
school
had
bus, right? That goes back to Zelda and Mario
so
1. Yeah,
cool.
no, and that's interesting to me that that survived through the GameCube era because I would have thought like, oh, the next generation they wouldn't appreciate that. The hey, you know, you can get to level 8 from level, you know, like all
Yep.
the
The rumors were the
oh yeah,
best.
oh yeah.
It was the absolute, and I got lied to at GameStop once by an employee. I was trading in Dragon Ball Xenoverse, not Xenoverse. It was Dragon Ball the first Budokai, Dragon Ball Z Budokai. I was trading it in. It was a PS2 game. I was trading it in for Ultimate Battle 22, which had been ported from Japan to the States, uh, and it came out after Budokai. It was like a newer release, but it was on the PS1. I was a big Dragon Ball Z
Oh
fan,
yeah.
and I thought, well, this is really cool. I want to play it. I know the GameStop employee was basically shielding me away from the trash because Ultimate Battle 22 was just an awful game, just a horrifically awful, terrible game. And I know but what he told me was, um, oh, if you do X and Y, if you beat these characters and you do this, you unlock Super Saiyan 4 this, and Super Saiyan 4 Goku, and you get these extra characters. Because I had told him, dude, I unlocked all the characters in Budokai. Like, I'm bored with it. I beat it. Like, I've got everything in it. And he's like, do you have this? Because he just pulled it out of his butt basically. But he was like trying to get me to like, dude, please, kid, don't do this to yourself. but I still did, and I realized the moment I got home and I popped in the disc, and like after like 30 minutes, I was like,
Well, you
"Oh
wound up being
no!"
smarter than my youngest brother, who at the time was a little kid. But some very cruel person told him, in Yoshi's story, if you collect some huge number of watermelons, you'll unlock like the gold Yoshi or whatever. And we kept telling him,
Yeah,
"You've been had, you've been lied to." He did not believe us. He got
yep,
all the watermelons. It's like, dude, oh,
yeah.
they rolled you, you know.
For better or for worse, I loved the rumors and the word of mouth. It
Oh
added so
yeah,
much to the experience. And nowadays that we have the internet, not just the internet, but we have guides and how to's
yeah.
for everything. It takes away so much. There are moments when I'm playing, like even a new game. If there's a moment where I get stuck for longer than like 18, 20 minutes, I'm like, all right, screw
Yeah,
this.
it's
What
yeah,
do I got to
18 to
do?
20 seconds. What are you talking about? Like with
Yeah.
Adventures of Chris, I realized this as I was making the game, is that so many people now play with the walkthrough right there at the ready at all times, and they're totally intolerant of any frustration or any ambiguity, right? And so like
Yep.
I realized I have got to supply my own game FAQ for this, because like, I can't, the community's not going to come out with one necessarily anytime soon. I just need to have it because people are going to want it. And
Yep.
so I made my own kind of rough Steam guide where I was just like explaining how to beat the bosses, how to find all the secrets. And people, I know they looked at it like you just it's kind of an expectation now. And I'm a big hypocrite about this because like I'm currently playing through the Famicom version of Final Fantasy 3, because
Okay.
I never have, and I thought, I want to see how they actually did it.
Is that Final Fantasy 4 labeled for newer? I know some of the older ones they like labeled
Oh, you
them
mean
like
like
2
the
is 3
weird
or
numbering differences between America and Japan? Yeah.
yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
because Final Fantasy 3 US is Final Fantasy 6 in Japan. So the actual
Oh,
Final
okay.
Fantasy 3
Way
that I'm
off.
playing right now was not released in the US for a long time. Like it got
Okay.
completely skipped. And eventually they released, I want to say, they on the DS. And
That's what I remember, and that's where it all started for me was the older ones. I found out about them and the discrepancy in the numbers through the D there was a couple of titles
yes.
for the DS, and it was like, "Oh, isn't actually 3
Yeah, if
or
you're
whatever it
American, like
was, or
I still
6."
think of 6 as 3. Like if I'm just like spitballing with someone, I'll call it Final Fantasy 3 because that's just like it's stuck in my head that way. I'm used to calling Final Fantasy 4 Final Fantasy 2. That's very confusing to people, but like this is how it is. And it's not Dragon Quest.
What's your
My
favorite?
favorite Final Fantasy?
Yeah.
It alternates between 6 and 7.
6 and
Meaning,
7?
Final Fantasy 3 US and 7. Yeah,
Which ones did you stop at? Have you played them
I've
all? Have you
not I've
stopped
not
at
played them
certain ones?
all. I would say the last one that I played in numerical order. Well, actually, I played 14 last, which is the big MMO. Final
Mhm.
Fantasy 13 was really the last. You said you played 12, right? So you have some experience that
Yep.
I more or less skipped it. I played it somewhat, but it didn't like, I don't know. It's one of those games that like you play it for a while, then like you stop for whatever reason, you go on a trip or something, and you just don't pick it
Yep.
up when you come back. So
It's tough to pick up when you get
yeah,
back to it too because the story and yeah, I get
it's
exactly what you're
it
saying.
was not like it had a little bit of a different vibe, but I had played
Yep.
now I've played all of them 1 through 10, a little bit of 12, and then I've played 13, and some of 14. The most recent ones, 15 and 16, I haven't. I've watched one of my
Okay.
brothers play some of them, so I kind of know the gist of them. But like, it's getting a
Mhm.
little bit like, I was telling you earlier how I'm not into first person shooters. I'm also like, if you start getting into like serious like modern console action games where like you have to remember a whole bunch of buttons all at once, like my NES
Mhm.
controller brain starts to shut down a little bit. Like Final
Yeah.
Fantasy VII Remake. which is a game you would think, oh, he's got to be all over that, right? And I have played it some, but I'm just like, man, like they made combat way more complicated than it was, with the menu driven system in days of
Yeah.
yore. And like it's like you're throwing a lot of mechanics at me all at once. And yeah.
I think they do have in the menus buried. I believe there is the option to turn on turn
They have
based,
a
like
turn-based ish
classic.
system from what I understand. But like this is also a thing I learned with Adventures of Chris. No one will take the easy difficulty setting if they feel like it somehow is like a defeat, right? Like if I offer you
Yeah.
difficulty settings at the start of Adventures of Chris, and I know I'm like watching the guy play, I'm like, I know you need to take the easy one because you don't have experience in this genre.
Yeah.
Like you haven't played in a long time. Please pick
Yep.
easy. And be like, you know what? I'm feeling like I'm gonna go hard mode or whatever. I'm like, nah.
Yeah.
Because I did this to myself, right? Like I probably would have had a much more fun time if I had chosen like the term based one. But I'm like, well, I'm not gonna be that. I'm gonna do it the way they intended. I'm gonna tough it
Yeah.
out. And then you get frustrated, and then do you say, well, let's try again? Let's go back and put it on the easy side. No, you're just done, right? Like this is why like
Yep.
early difficulty settings, unless you're dealing with people who know for a fact that they like zero challenge, or people that like I want the maximum challenge no matter what, those people are helped with
Yep.
with difficulty settings. Everyone else just picks whichever one looks like the one is intended, and that's it. They won't pick anything else in my experience. But
Yeah. And you can see it a lot in modern design, modern games where they're approaching it differently instead of giving like a static difficulty selection at the beginning. They'll have items that will,
yeah,
make it so you auto do
well,
things so you don't have
Sea
to.
of Stars, recent indie RPG. They
Yep.
released. They have like relics, I think is what they call them, that you can.
Yep.
They're basically difficulty adjustments you can turn on and off, and I guess
Yeah.
those are working for people. I didn't really use them myself.
It's a clever way. It's a very clever way to establish difficulty without spelling it out,
Yeah,
and making someone feel like they're going to lose out on various experiences in the game, or feel like less, which I can't really emphasize with empathize with that, or sympathize with it.
yeah,
Is what I mean. Like I've never looked at a difficulty and seen easy and been like, oh, I'll have to select easy. I suck. It's never been like that. It's always been, I don't think the developer wants me to play on that. I think that normal probably is closer to
yeah. You're
that,
you're trying to go
to
for
the
the
experience they want me
intent,
to
right?
have.
Like, and
Yeah, that's where my motivation is for selecting those. But again, with Sea of Stars, I'm playing through that now too, on my Steam Deck. I like the relic system because like you can tell, oh, I know why that's there. I
yeah,
get it. If I have a bunch of trouble, or if I want a certain style of experience, I can
yeah.
just equip one of those
And
and
it
I'm good to
has the
go.
advantage of,
And
I think, making it clear that it's not like always permanent, right? Like you understand
yep,
what the rules are, sort of. The one difficulty system
very
I
clever.
have been like, I keep going back and forth in my head as to whether or not it sounds like a good idea, is adaptive difficulty, like famously Resident Evil 4, right? Like, you know,
Hmm.
you're not playing very well, they start secretly removing bad guys from later levels, so you're just fighting fewer, and you have no idea. You know, it's a
Yeah,
little it's a
that's
little
kind of
bit like
cool.
if you're DMing, you're kind of manually, like just subtly, like if you're, because I have been tempted to want to do this while I've watched, like, say, my nephew or niece play one of my games. I'm like, oh, I wish I could, like, manually make this a little easier for them right now because they're
Yep.
struggling. But the problem is, like, and maybe it's just me. If you do adaptive difficulty, you can't tell me, because I'm
Yes.
afraid, like,
Yes.
wait, what did I miss? What are
Yeah.
you changing without telling me? Like, am I not getting the full
Yep.
experience? Did you nerf this so hard that, like, it's not the same game anymore? Like, I just want to know, you know, what is
Yeah.
actually different here. But yeah, it's a trick. So, um,
Yeah.
The thing with the JR,
Well, Final Fantasy 16, they do closer to Sea of Stars, and where in 16 they give you various items to, like, there are certain items where it's like you auto counter. You don't have to worry about timing it right, or it'll just do it. You just equipped it. It's kind of the same
oh yeah,
deal there.
cool.
And that one, yeah, 16 is 10 was my favorite.
Okay.
I've tried to play through 6. Because like a lot of people say 6 is the bomb.
And
And I need to
it's
play
just
through
not for
6.
you, or you just haven't tried it.
No, it's one of those games where I start up with the full intention of, all right, I'm going to deep dive this thing, and then I just don't get back to it every
I
single time.
gotcha.
I have a handful of games
So
that,
for
like,
what 12 is for
even
me, 6 is for you. Yeah, I get you.
it, and it's, well, it's a lot of like recent games have gotten me like that too, especially this year because of all the games that have come out.
A
But
lot
like
of big games
Hogwarts,
too. Like, Tears of the
big ones.
Kingdom. Oh my gosh.
I've played. I couldn't stand that game, and I played maybe 7 hours of it, trying and trying.
Oh, that is fascinating
That
to me. Okay, I don't think I've ever. Now, I guess I'd ask, did you like Breath of the Wild?
loved it, loved it. Breath of the Wild was a special one. That was one where what made it even more special was, like, my girlfriend loves Zelda, so she'd watch me play, and so it was a fun, like,
That's great.
experience to
Yeah,
be
when
able
you
to
can
play
do it
that. She'd
together.
watch, and
Yeah,
yep, and because it was such a departure from the norm, um, and I didn't watch any trailers or anything, so I just got to experience that thing raw.
that's fantastic.
And then when you come out of the cave and you realize, like, whoa, this big, like, I get to explore all this as I want,
Mm-hmm.
and then you just start collecting stuff. Oh, I can bake these apples here, and I can, like, this tree branch, if I hold it near that fire, it burns, like, and you just start playing with everything and figuring everything out and seeing, well, what else can I do? And then you start to learn these different mechanics, freezing time and whatnot, and then you get to play with that, and you just get to explore the boundaries of everything. And then there's logic involved, that it, like, common sense, like, if I leave this here, it should do this, and it does. Um, all of that was amazing. And then Tears of the Kingdom comes out, and it just feels like a big old cash grab. A big old, hey, we noticed kids like Minecraft, they like Fortnite.
They
Okay, we're gonna
do.
introduce this building. They're like, let's just introduce this building mechanic. Let's get a, you can stick everything together, but not only that, we're gonna make you do it for puzzles and ways to get through this game. We're gonna make you stick these things together and become a crafter. Now it's a crafting game. It's like, this is Zelda. You're just departing completely from what a Zelda game should be.
Yeah.
I'm not here to play Minecraft or Fortnite. Those games are fine, and I'm sure if I was a different person, I'd like them. They're just not for me. I don't like building. I don't like crafting.
Oh, you're
Um,
not 12. Well, that's
yeah,
not that's
well,
not
it's just
fair, right?
it's
There's adults that like this too, but my
well,
11-year-old
yeah, and it,
nephew loves Tears of the Kingdom.
yeah,
Loves Tears of the Kingdom, and he's
yeah, and it's what got me about Tears of the Kingdom was I was listening to a podcast, and they were talking about Game of the Year candidates because of all of the games that have come out. This was before Baldur's Gate 3 and Starfield.
Diablo 4,
Um, yep. And so one of the
16.
guys was saying, he said, well, Tears of the Kingdom obviously is the game of the year. Not only that, it's arguably the greatest game of all
But
time. And I heard that and I turned it off immediately. I was like, I can't listen to this. This is insane. The recency bias is unreal with this. Um, Again, I've played that game like 5 separate times, at least an hour each,
is
and
can't.
I cannot do it. I
Well,
can't.
you did better than me. I'm not even motivated to take it out of the shrink wrap. Um,
It's tough.
I
It doesn't look
I
good either.
loved Breath of the
Like,
Wild so much, but I also loved, this maybe makes me a little bit of a weird gamer. I loved finishing it, right? I loved like
yep.
completing it. It felt really good. I got all the shrines and got all the Koroks, but like I had a great time with that game. Absolutely loved it. And when I was done, I'm like,
Yep.
I am satisfied and I am finished. And then my brother's like,
Yep.
hey, did you get the DLC? I'm like, don't even tell me about the DLC. I don't want to know.
Yeah.
And then,
Yep. I had all the DLC, did all of it. It's
but
great.
yeah, I'm sure it was. I just wanted to be done with it. And and then Tears of the
Yeah.
Kingdom gets announced, and I'm really excited because I'm thinking like, okay, it's going to be like,
Oh, I was
it's going to
too.
take Breath of the Wild in some kind of like maybe a darker direction perhaps, or like something kind of
Sure.
like maybe more with more dungeons, more similar to like an earlier Zelda, like bring in some elements that were left out of Breath of the Wild. And I'm like, that could be really cool. But then years and years and years go by, right? It just takes a really long time. And then finally we get it, and everything that I see about it, everything I watch from streamers and everything, it feels like just a massive Breath of the Wild DLC to me. Like it's not the distinctiveness factor isn't strong enough. And so I'm just like, apart from, obviously you're mashing things together and building them, but like that doesn't do anything for me. And
No.
the
And then there are abilities that they've added in. There's a bit you can create. You have a weapon, and now you can stick it to other things to make a unique weapon. You can stick a rock on top of the tip of a
yeah, and
sword.
you can like
Um,
go up through things, but like what I was anticipating was going to be something to the effect of like Ocarina of Time to Majora's Mask, right? Like if Majora's Mask had taken, that many years to come out following Ocarina of Time, I
mhm.
might have resented it a little bit, right? Because I'm like, well, I'd kind of like something that feels a little newer than that. That's actually
Yeah.
kind of feels a bit of a different game, because every Zelda game for a long time like it was pretty significantly revamped from previous. Like, there's a lot that's similar, but it's also, it's like Final Fantasy, right? Like you're expecting something, this is going to be different, whatever it is. It's not going to be
Mhm.
just more of the same. And so, yeah, I don't know, that's just from my impression. Maybe I ought to, pull it out, give it a try. Maybe I'll get addicted to it. I kind of doubt it, which is why I don't. It's like you.
A lot of people love it. A lot of people love it, and they 10 out of 10s
Yeah,
and one of the greatest things ever. But for me, it's closer to Skyward Sword,
I did
and the way
not
that
like that game
was.
at all.
Yeah, it's like you had Twilight Princess and then Skyward Sword, and it's like that's the change that I feel. It's like they took a cake that was really good. They had a recipe down, and they were like, "All right, let's start mixing in some other like let's put beef in it." They're like, "Let's people like burgers, so let's put beef in the cake. They'll
I
like
like
that,
that
right?"
metaphor. Yeah,
And then some people love it. Some people dug in and they're like, "There's beef in
yeah.
this,"
Hey,
but it's
bacon
like,
in my dessert.
yeah,
You know.
yeah. It's like that. I really liked what you made before. Like, what are
Yeah.
we doing?
Oh,
But
so just to be clear,
then that
you were a
game,
fan of Twilight Princess, but not Skyward Sword.
love Twilight
Okay.
Princess.
You have
Yeah,
the correct opinions.
Twilight Princess was really cool. The theme, the changing into the dog. There's so much, or the wolf rather, but the game itself was
I
loved
had a
it.
good
I've
time with
played it
Twilight
multiple
Princess. I
times.
wish I had gotten the Wii U remake before I, put the Wii U in the back of my closet. Um,
I never got that one
if
either.
I
Yeah,
did get the Wind Waker one, and I thought Wind Waker worked really well on that console, surprisingly enough.
yeah. Wind Waker was another good one. That's a solid
It
one.
was.
I
I
enjoyed it.
actually I didn't like it when it first came out on the GameCube for a number of reasons. And then when I went back and replayed it, as a grown-up person on the, on the Wii U, I'm like, you know what? I did not give this game its proper fair shake. This is actually a really good Zelda
It
game.
ages
Yeah.
well. It also ages well.
And after Skyward
It
Sword,
was
I
a
was like, you know what? Yeah, this
yeah,
now this game now looks amazing. And the things that bothered me
yeah,
about it at the time, nothing. Compared
yeah,
to like what was coming. You know, um,
yeah.
yeah, I loved Ocarina of Time, and Wind Waker was one of these that like started applying a little bit more maybe narrative restriction than even Ocarina of Time had. You know, if you put me in a Zelda game, you give me a boat, and if I start
Hmm.
sailing somewhere, and the boat turns and looks at me and says, "You can't go this way. You've really upset me." Like,
Yeah,
what are you
yeah,
talking about? This is Zelda. You can't just
yeah.
tell me I can't go
I
there.
did I did really like the theme and the characters introduced in it though. And the fact that the boat would like talks to you and they're like it's that was something just the overall like
It's
vibe
a
and theme
it's a
just all
very
came
charming
together. Like
game,
this is
and
this is neat. He
it's
is
probably the
very
best
charming.
Zelda soundtrack. Is it? Yeah, I think it might be the best Zelda soundtrack for my taste. Wind Waker. It's a lot of good
Yeah, it
music
was
in that.
I've replayed I haven't finished Wind Waker, but I replayed it on I can't remember what it was. It might be my Steam Deck. I might be playing it on my
Ooh,
Steam Deck. It's really cool. But yeah,
that's fantastic.
I don't know. There the yeah, the that new Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. I forgot the name for a moment there. That's how much the disdain.
Oh man,
Uh
sorry. Sorry. Wow.
yeah. It just bummed me out cuz I loved Breath of the Wild so much. And then and my girlfriend sat down and we were like, "All right, let's do it. Let's play it." And then like 30 minutes in, it was like I turned to her. I was like, "I don't think I'm going to be able to do this." And she's like, "What are you talking about?" And I was like, I'm not getting any enjoyment out of this at all, like in any way. This is
Wow.
not for me.
Okay.
This is for others. Um, yeah, that was rough for me. Honestly, my game of the year, and again, I haven't played Baldur's Gate 3, and I haven't played Starfield, and I haven't played Spider-Man 2, which I'm sure is going to be really cool. My game of the year so far is Final Fantasy 16.
Oh wow.
I
Okay.
just that one is insane.
Okay.
My favorite Final Fantasy was 10. Um, Simply because it had such a that was the first Final Fantasy I ever played, and I just remember the commercials for it, and I remember the poster for it, and I remember going to GameStop and getting it, and everything about it. I've replayed it like 20 times on all different PlayStation Vita, PlayStation 2. I've played on the new consoles, HD remaster, Switch. I've played it on that. The Aeons, getting all the Aeons, the
Oh, don't
hidden
tell me you
Aeons.
did the
Uh,
lightning thing and the choke and
yep, the
every
Lightning.
blitz ball. Oh, you got all the.
Loved Blitzball. I played so much Blitzball. I played so much Blitzball. I
Okay,
uh
wow,
I was engrossed in that game, the world. That was one of those
wow.
games where when you play it and you sit down and you're sitting there playing it, there's a moment where nothing else is there, and the only reason the only when you realize that you snap out of it, that's the only time they actually realize how focused in the like this zen space that you were. um Happened all the time with Final Fantasy 10. I would just be
And you're like,
playing,
where did
and
the
then I
world
would
go?
realize,
Yeah, no, no,
yeah, I'd look around like, oh, it's dark out, what is
that
going
doesn't
on?
happen to me too
um
frequently, but it actually did for Ocarina of Time when I was I don't remember how old I was. But like I remember it came out close to Thanksgiving, and like the Friday after, I like wake up, put it in, whole day goes by. I don't even know that I
yeah,
left my bedroom. My cousin's like, "Are you gonna like hang out with your family?" I'm like, "Well, I had intended to." uh,
yeah,
I guess not
yeah,
today. You know, but
yeah,
yeah, no, it's such a rare thing though. Now I feel like I'm just not as engrossed
yep,
more. In fact, like the last game that I feel like I've really just totally fallen in love with. Like I really did like Breath of the Wild. I wouldn't say that I fell in love with it. Was actually Fallout New Vegas, which is not that recent. Um,
oh, awesome game,
but I had
awesome game.
such a good time with it, and
It was Obsidian, I believe.
yeah,
Yeah, that
it
was
was
cool.
my
They did
introduction to the
great.
Fallout universe actually. So after that, I started like trying to get to like 3 and 4 and some of the older ones too, and like the New Vegas thing because it was my first. Right, it's still really special. Um,
That's a tough one to start with because the bar is set so
I
high
loved that world.
that once you
Yeah,
get off that,
I
yeah, they're all good, but that
and
one's
I really
awesome.
want to get into the older ones because I feel like the worlds are really interesting, and I'm from that time, so like I like retro things, but like the quality of life features are so not there in Fallout 1 and 2,
Yeah.
and PC,
Yep.
like oh
Oh, you're talking, yeah,
Yeah, no, yeah, the
originals.
early ones, and yeah, no, I've played three. I recently beat it for the first time. Uh, Never did beat four though. And yeah, so I've still got some Fallout to experience, but yeah, I loved New Vegas, loved it, and I haven't had that, like, I loved Mario Odyssey too, actually, but not to that
Yeah,
degree.
that was a really good one. I'm surprised they didn't do more with it. It's just like it came out, they're like, "Here you go, enjoy, no DLC,
Little bit of
take it as
DLC.
you
There
want."
was the Luigi game, but like not. Eh.
I don't even
Yeah.
remember that. There's like a Luigi
Well,
DLC for
was it
that?
DLC? Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was just something that they added. I don't know. Like there's a thing where like Luigi would hide a balloon somewhere around the level, and or no, it was a multiplayer thing. Um, I remember my niece and nephew having a good time with that.
Oh, I see, yeah. I'm seeing what you're talking about. It was a free DLC that came out, um, free Luigi DLC that came out
Yeah,
later on.
Odyssey.
New
But
online
you're
mini
right. They
game.
they kind of dropped
Yep.
it. No, I am looking forward to Mario Wonder. Um, that feels like they're finally doing something actually different and interesting with 2D Mario. Um,
I haven't seen much of that other than the reveal and the
okay.
logo, but I haven't seen the
Oh,
trailer
dude,
or
they're
anything.
they do some weird stuff. You're talking about like the 80s and 90s aesthetic where you're like drugs were involved. There's definitely some of
Mhm.
that in this. Um, yeah,
Good.
I don't know. I mean, 2D platformers may not be your thing, uh, but
Oh, no, I definitely, like, I enjoy those. I've played, like, when I met my girlfriend now, we've been together for 10, a little over 10 years. And she's got a son, and he always play he'd always have the handheld consoles, and so we always got him the 2D or the platformers, Mario's, all the variations or versions rather of those, and I'd always end up picking it up and play it. Those are
nice. Oh yeah, and you played
they're
Sonic,
good.
so you
They're
you you
fun.
you, you know, uh, yeah.
Yeah. They're fun. They're definitely good. It's a different mindset.
Hmm.
But they're definitely, especially the Mario ones, because of the attention to detail
Yeah, like
on those.
it's so hard to compete. Like this is something that when I was making Adventures of Chris, like um, I remember like you might not think about this when you're trying to build a platformer, when you're trying to design a platformer. You're like, okay, I'm going to get like the movement mechanics, and that's going to be work. I'm going to get that just right. I'm going to like have to do all the art and come up with the monsters and things. But then when you're like actually coming up with um gimmicks or like concepts for like platforming mechanics to make the levels feel different and interesting and unique is actually
Hmm.
remarkably difficult. And this wasn't really like brought to my attention until like I was actually at Playthrough North Carolina, and the indie dev next to
Nice.
me
Yeah.
like was looking at my game and he was also working on a 2D platform, and he's like, I just don't know how do you come up with this stuff. Like he was really impressed. And I'm like I was realizing as he was
Yeah.
talking, I'm like, yeah, this actually was a lot of work to like figure out how to
Yeah.
do weird and different and interesting things in a 2D platformer. Because if you just like, hey, let's just throw some Goombas and some Koopa Troopas on some hills and call it a day, like people get bored. You got to start, and you look at
Yeah.
Mario World, you look at Mario 3. There's so much variety, and they're always throwing something new and different at you, and yet they're doing it in such a way that like it's not throwing you for a loop, right? You're learning, you're feeling your way through it, um and that it's just really impressive, right? Like Mario, it feels so natural, but there's so much work that goes into making stuff like that is that
Yeah.
varied and that smooth, you know.
Yeah. And then the new one's
Yep,
Wonder,
Super
right?
Mario Wonder.
Super Mario Wonder. Yeah, that one I like the logo for it, but that's all I really
They did
know
a
about it.
Nintendo Direct where they basically, I think they spoiled a little bit more of the game than I wish they had, but they're actually adding some like a little more exploratory open mechanics to it, which makes me really excited. Like where you can kind of go around different levels in the order you want, and you can like collect badges that give you powers to different things as you're going around, like wall jumping and so forth. I'm like, this is fantastic. This is
Yeah.
exactly what I want from a 2D Mario.
Oh. I'm looking at they have basically a landing page for it. I need to click off it. I need to stop. I don't want to spoil too
Yeah.
much of it. I just saw an elephant.
Yep.
I don't.
That is a whole
I
thing.
need
Yeah,
to.
Elephant Mario.
Yeah.
It
I like it. I'm about it. When does that come
That's
out?
a good question.
I didn't see
It
on the
felt like
page.
it wasn't that far out. Like maybe October. If I want, actually, I shouldn't say that. I don't know.
It is October. Wow, October 20th.
So many games coming out this year.
Wow, that is
Like,
insane.
this is why. Hey,
I'm gonna have to get that.
uh,
That's another one I gotta buy.
yeah. Are you a Baldur's Gate person? Is that something that's like on your?
It's on my list to play, but typically not my
Gotcha.
style of game. I played Divinity Original Sin 2.
It's just not really for you. I understand.
Yeah, it's the camera angle that does it for me, honestly. Like, it's a good game. I love RPGs. It's just that kind of RPG is not.
So yeah, avoid Fallout 1 and 2.
They're the same
similar
camera.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Diablo is that same camera angle though, right? But it's a very different feel.
Very different. Diablo, I've finished Diablo 3 and really enjoyed it. But again, it's a loot.
Yeah,
collector. It's hitting different buttons.
I had fun with Diablo 1, and that's really kind of about it for me. But yeah, hoping you're okay with some overhead RPGs in case you ever do want to give Geo Mythica a little bit more of a try.
Well, so that's a different, like, Geo Mythica is a different vibe from like Divinity Original Sin 2. That camera angle kills it for me because I know if you just turn it behind the main character, I can be so much more immersed in this. Like, this world is awesome. This is really cool. Even at the beginning when you're on the boat, it's like, this is really cool. Just bring the camera. Give me the option.
You feel far away from it.
Way too far away. I feel way too removed from the action, from the world. I'm not immersed at all.
Yeah, that's another indie dev thing I realized the hard way. You think when I was making Adventures of Chris, you're making a platformer, it's really important to see a lot, right? So you feel like you have more control. Mm-hmm. But I was realizing, like, it is way more satisfying at some kind of fundamental core level for your platformer character to be big on the screen, right? Like,
something about it.
And it was so frustrating to me because I wanted players to be able to see more, because you can do more fairly, right? Like, when you're playing Sonic and he's going really fast, you have no idea, what's coming in front. So It doesn't entirely feel fair. But like, if Sonic was as tiny as he needed to be for like you to actually like make a game out of, avoiding things while you're running at full speed, it would feel so weird and so distant and not satisfying at all. So it was just a decision you had to make and say, you know what, you're going to have a smaller viewport in our 2D platformer, because otherwise I think it's going to feel bad, and that it's unfortunate, but that's how it is.
Yeah, but I think that retro style, that 8-bit style, it's fine. I don't have an issue with that at all. But when you go 3D in a game like that, where the theme, it's you want to be immersed. You want to be as fully immersed as you can possibly be and have connection with the characters. And I mean, again, Baldur's Gate 3, I haven't played it yet. I will play it. Simply because you can't really avoid a game that gets that much praise. I'm not going to be a snob and turn my nose at it. I'll give it a shot. But I think I'm going to enjoy Starfield more, honestly.
Are you like Skyrim fan? You like into general Bethesda?
I like Skyrim. I didn't love it, but I liked it a lot. I haven't replayed it like a billion times. I didn't put.
You might think I did if you saw the amount of hours I have on that game on Steam, but it's really just that one playthrough that like. I don't know.
Yeah. I played all the way through it and I
Okay.
loved it. And I loved exploring and all the side quests first. And I never wanted to proceed the main quest. I just wanted to keep going. All the unique things that you're finding. You go into a cave. I don't know. You're stumbling on it's all about like
Breath of the Wild has a similar vibe, right? Like you're just constantly finding things. It
yeah,
rewards exploration
it's
anyway.
new.
Yeah.
Everything's new. Yeah, it's like you're pioneer. It's just all new experiences, and that it's always surprising you. That's always super cool. But
Yeah.
yeah, that and going back to Divinity Original Sin 2, I could tell it's a good game. I can really tell. Like when you're playing, it's like, yeah, the dialogue's awesome, the options are great. All the in terms of the combat, there's a lot of flexibility there. There's a lot of things you can do. Um, there's just so much in the way that you interact with all the NPCs and the characters can change different paths and certain all of that. I can respect it. I understand the work had to be insane to be able to have something as open ended as that in terms of game design. It's got to be crazy. It's just something that I just wish you'd change the camera angle, and then I'd be in. If you
That's
just change the
funny. Yeah.
angle.
I feel like I had a similar response to Roller Coaster Tycoon 3, where like it was, they had improved the graphics, making them 3D or whatever, but like the camera tended to be so far out that
Yeah,
you're like,
put me in the roller coaster. I want to
I
enjoy
want to
this.
just get down in there, a little bit more. Yeah.
Yeah. Even just giving me the
Well,
option to
they
do
they
it. Like
you could
if
zoom, right? I don't
Divinity
want to
just
make it sound like you couldn't, but like for whatever reason, like the default, the general way that it would work was like you were pretty far
yeah.
away.
Yeah. Thanks for making it all the way to the end of the episode. I hope you enjoyed it. While you're still here, it might be worth subscribing to the channel or following or maybe leaving a comment. This is an early channel, so any additional engagement helps, and feedback is always greatly appreciated. Thank you.